Welcome into episode 540 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin, fresh coming off of Don Sweeney's press conference availability pre-trade deadline, which, guys, is that something he does annually? Did he have to do that?
I don't know if he has to, but he does usually do this.
Okay. So that was earlier today. We'll discuss our takeaways from that in short order. The Bruins also had a game against the Flyers over the weekend that they lost 3-1 in a game that the Bruins played, I think, for the most part, pretty well. I think they generated out chance Philadelphia, but you're just not going to win them all at the end of the day, right? And that's kind of what that game was. You'd love to see him win it, but they're not going to win them all. So we'll break that game down as well.
Got goalied by old friend Dan Vladar. Not that that's like the only reason they lost. Like, it's not quite that simplistic, but
no.
I mean, they had chances to score and, at least tie that game.
Yep. All right, Scott, why don't you kick us off with the opening shifts here?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Don Sweeney met with the media after Monday's practice, spoke for about 22, 23 minutes. And we're going to get into a lot of what the Bruins could do before Friday's trade deadline. One of my takeaways, though, is without directly saying it, is the things that Don Sweeney seems to be ruling out. And one is, and not that this is surprising to us, but one is buying rentals, players who are pending unrestricted free agents. He referenced multiple times his desire to kind of not lose sight of the course that they started to set last year and take a longer term vision. He was asked directly about rentals and said that that is not his inclination, but that if there's a player who wants to be here and is open to extending, it's something he could consider. So this kind of goes back to, why did the Rasmus Andersson trade fall apart? The Bruins really wanted Rasmus Andersson if he was going to extend with them. Once it was clear he wasn't going to, and he was just going to be a rental, they didn't want any part of it. And I think that applies to a lot of trades. And it's also why you just have not seen them linked to many of the rentals who are out there, the pending unrestricted free agents. You're seeing them linked more to guys with at least another year after this, if not more. So that was one thing that I feel pretty confident we can rule out. The other is selling pieces, even his own pending UFAs, unless there is a replacement coming in. I asked him directly about Andrew Peeke and Victor Arvidsson, who are the two pending UFAs on the roster. And his answer was that he's in no rush to ship out guys who have helped them get to where they are. He referenced multiple times his desire to either, if not reward, then at least give this team a chance to see it through because they've put themselves in a good position. And within that same answer, he said, now if we happen to add at the same position, maybe we could move someone off the active roster, which is what I think has to happen. I think the only way Peeke goes out is if there's a right shot defenseman coming in. Same with Arvidsson up front. If there's a top six or middle six winger coming in that they think is either an upgrade over Arvidsson or is someone younger with term, then you could see Arvidsson get traded away. But otherwise, I think Sweeney is probably inclined to maintain the roster that he has and not subtract off it unless there is a direct replacement lined up.
Yeah, and I'm debating my opening shift because I feel like mine was going to cross over a little bit with what you just said. So I'm going to change on the fly and just kind of add on to what you're talking about, which is I asked Don Sweeney about adding on the right side of the D, in the framework that, hey, Don, this is what we've heard for rumors. It seems like a lot of the players connected are on the right side of your defense. And with Andrew Peeke being having an expiring contract at the end of the season, like, does that mean there's a need now for adding there? And in kind of a roundabout way, he said yes. It started with basically saying, oh, I'm comfortable with the depth that we have there. He brought up some guys that played limited time in their call-ups from Providence, like Callahan, and also mentioned that Lorai has, the ability to play on the right side if needed, and is playing there right now, because we can talk about this too. Like, Peak was scratched, and is there an ulterior motive besides just play that explains why he's been kept out of games? But basically, he says, I'm comfortable with the depth. But I think we have to be realistic that our group probably needs to be supplemented in that position. So, I mean, there's at least a little bit of acknowledgement of the need there. And if you read between the lines a little bit, Scott, I think you probably picked up on this too. Like, there wasn't he didn't really want to address what was next with Peak. And I think a few of us got the sense that maybe he's not here past the deadline. I know Sweeney said, we have a few games in a short amount of time and we could use all the depth that we can get. But I think it would be kind of short-sighted to not get something for him, maybe, if you only expect him to be here for another few games.
Scott, would you like to respond to that accusation?
Accusation? What am I being accused of?
I'm just trying to play a judge here.
Yeah, I mean, I could see Peak staying. Like I said, like if they don't add, I could definitely see him holding on to Peak. But yeah, I mean, I think looking, if we're talking about deadline plus off season, yes, I think his answer to your question, Bridget, was a clear acknowledgement that there is a need to add on the right side of the defense. And really what I take that as is meaning an upgrade, right? And I think part of him listing off all those names is his way of saying, like, we have depth, which they do. Like, they have depth on defense. What they're lacking is a true second pairing right shot defenseman. And that's what, in his roundabout way, I think Sweeney was acknowledging.
All right, I'll approach the bench now, and I'm going to do a double audible here, and I'm going to steal what was supposed to be Bridget's opening shift.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And basically, I just want to pose the question to you guys and to listeners. Ultimately, it comes down to, what are you getting back in return? Of course, right? But generally speaking, are there any untouchable assets, in your opinion, regarding the Bruins and this trade deadline? And I think there's probably only one name out there who's speculated to potentially be on the move that I think would even qualify as somebody worth giving up, a top asset or two for. But I'll just ask that, like, are there any untouchables in your guys' minds right now? And, James Hagens is a name. The 26th first-round pick that you have from Toronto is a big one. Boston's own, really any of Boston's first-round picks in the next couple of years, but the Toronto one's the biggest one, I would say. James Hagens, Dean Letourneau, Will Zellers, just to name a couple, right? But there's more out there. So as the trade deadline approaches on Friday, are there any untouchables in your mind?
There are pretty much never untouchables in my, truly untouchable in my mind. I will say I cannot envision the trade that happens this deadline where I'd be willing to deal James Hagens.
Mm-hmm.
So that's about as close as it gets for me. Even Robert Thomas is the biggest fish out there right now. And even that, I'm I would be so reluctant to give up James Hagens in that trade. Unless it's 1-for-1, where it's that's all it costs me. Well, all in quotation marks. I don't have to give up anything else on top of it. I consider it. Will that trade James Hagens 1-for-1 for Robert Thomas? I know we did this exercise earlier in the year. I posed it, and at that time, Hagens wasn't quite playing to the level I wanted to see him at, and I think I said I was willing to do it. He has taken off since then, since the break, or even really since Thanksgiving. I would be more hesitant to do it now, but that I would at least debate. But other than that, like I'm not trading Hagens. And then the Toronto first round pick, like it would take a lot. But again, like if we're gonna use the Robert Thomas example as like that's the big prize, like there's a trade package there where I can include that. So it really would just be Hagens, I think, for me.
Yeah, and we can talk about him too because he's somebody that was asked about a few times. I had gone into today with that being one of the main things I wanted to ask him about. And so he was asked earlier too, to me, kind of adding on to it about whether or not him or Letourneau or Zellers or any of the college guys have a potential to join the team because that's end of March. Like all of a sudden here we are, it's March. End of March, if they get knocked out in the regionals or there's a chance they don't actually make the tournament as of right now. They're right on the bubble. So end of March, early April would be the timeline for these guys to join the team if they were going to. I personally think there's no chance that Dean Letourneau is in that group. I think there's a higher chance, and I don't know if I'd maybe even give it like a little bit higher than a 50% chance. I don't know why, but I have this feeling that he's going to be here soon. I just
Letourneau
get this.
or Hagens?
No, Hagens. No, Letourneau not this year.
Yeah. Hagens, I will go way over 50%.
I get this.
I'm gonna say that's like 90+%.
You think so? Okay. Yeah. Well, I still hesitate just because I don't 100% know if that's what Sweeney wants, but I think that's what the player wants, and it could because a lot of other college hockey players that are at that caliber leave after their sophomore season. It would make sense, right? Like we saw Ryan Leonard do it last year. We've seen a lot of the high end guys, including from his own team, do that. So anyway, could he be here at the end of the year? He said he's not ruling it out, but he also said not a lot of young guys come in at the end of the season and make an impact. So I don't know if that's maybe he's trying to justify not doing it if he decides to not do it. Like, hey, especially because it's a playoffs, like, do we want to risk if we are a playoff team, do we want to risk like integrating him in? And that's why when I followed up with my question, I asked, does it make it more likely that you're able to add him to the roster with the fact that this year he's been a successful winger? Like, could that be a more natural fit right away? And I wasn't saying this as like, oh, forever he's going to be a winger, just in terms of entering the league and being, where there's a hole, could that be at winger? And he basically said, yeah, it's the easier lifting at winger because you're not having to take faceoffs against, Sidney Crosby, or you don't have to now go against all the best centers in the league, and the 200-foot game isn't quite as important because you're not defending in the center and it's not as much on your plate. I don't know. I think the fact that he can play wing is probably what's going to get him in the lineup. And I also think he mentioned, he can move other guys around and he could play center, but I just don't think that's what's going to happen. I think he'll slide in on wing. I think, Minton and Zaka and Elias Lindholm aren't going anywhere. I don't know if you want to put them on your fourth line, if it's at center. So I just think he comes in and plays wing.
Yeah, I agree. I think he plays wing when he enters the NHL for an acclimation period. My question for you guys is, if you look at the profile of James Hagens' style of play, you look at his skating ability, his ability to transition the puck from defense to offense for everybody on the ice alongside with him. I keep hearing a lot out there from Bruins fans or different analysts or whatever that they're not so sure if Hagens is a center, at the NHL level in general, long term too. I can't help but feel that that's a premature conclusion, or even, really opinion, I think, by people. I'm not talking when he enters the league. All the reasons Bridget mentioned, like I agree. I think he's going to be a winger to start. But when I think about Hagens, what's the better position for him to thrive in? Don't you kind of feel like the way he skates and his hockey IQ, the ability to gain speed and generate speed up the ice from the center position, starting down low, is the optimal position for him, rather than being stapled to the boards in the D zone as a winger, and that then kind of getting speed with a defenseman right on top of you. Like, I just feel like maybe he will be a winger long term. But as we speak right now in March of 26, I still feel like it would be best for his player profile to make it as a center, because not every player has his skating and his ability to generate that speed, over the course of 200 feet up the ice. So I still want to see him as a center long term, right? I'm not talking spring of 26 or anything like that, but I'm curious to follow that. I feel like I've seen a lot of rhetoric out there about, I don't know if he might be a winger, and he might be. I just feel like we're making these conclusions a little bit premature.
Yeah, I agree that it's premature, but I definitely think like it's worth discussing, because in my mind he pretty clearly has been better on the wing than at center this season. Now, maybe he would have gotten going eventually, and the slow start was just a slow start, and at some point he was going to turn it on and go on this heater no matter what position he was at. But like, it did pretty closely coincide with him moving to wing. And I think back, like I saw BC play Quinnipiac earlier this season, or that was opening night. So again, like maybe not the best test, but he spent a lot of time in the D zone in that game. Now, all of BC did. They got pretty well dominated in that game. But I thought being forced to defend so much, like really, and having to do that down low work kind of limited him, and he just never really got involved. Whereas when he's on the wing, it's like he's been consistently always involved offensively. And I do think it's freed him up. Like he's leading a lot of rushes. He has the puck on his stick a lot, which, yes, he also should at center. But the way BC's been playing it, it's like he's leading the transition. He's making plays off the wing. And I do still think he's like driving play from the wing, which again, you don't see a lot of those wingers in the NHL. You obviously have one of them in David Pastrnak. So I could see him being that kind of player in the NHL, where he's a play driving winger and something of a rarity. Like I could see him having that effect, but in general, yes, like bigger picture, I would still like to see him be a center longer term. Generally, that's just more valuable and would speak better about, I guess his development and like how he can impact this team and the potential to be that 1C that, this team needs to find at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think the wing discussion is worthwhile because it's worked really well this year.
Yeah, I Brian, did you look like you have a burning question? I have thoughts on that too, but you
No. I'll remember. Please go ahead.
Okay, so I will say, like, as somebody who's talked to Greg Brown a bunch over the last few weeks, because I've been on a lot of the BC broadcasts recently, I want to explain like some of the reasoning why he's been playing there and like what his dynamics have been in the wing position. So, and I know we say he's played a majority of the season on wing, which kind of makes it sound like, there's, 60-40. No, like it's like when I say a majority, I'm saying like 95% season on wing. Like we're talking like a big majority. And you want to know what the combination that he's on is. It's very effective. It's with two guys who are 6'5", 6'6". These are two big guys. And Gasso is a good defensive center. Can cover. And Oscar Hemming, who they just added at the halfway point of the season, is massive. And it just seems like there's been a concerted effort to kind of balance him out in terms of guys that have size and him, adding those two guys to his line was kind of purposeful, is also because those are probably the three best guys like that you can combine. Like that's more of a stacked line. And Hemming is young; he's only 17, but he's really already a very intelligent, skilled hockey player. So there's been a necessity for him to be on wing, but then when somebody, when one of their players are coming back, or I should say, when other players were out with injury, Gasso missed time with injury, Jelvik missed time with injury for a long time, just finally came back this weekend. There were openings for them to move him back to center in the absence of Gasso, and it really wasn't done. So I just feel like adding that context might kind of help people that might not have followed this season for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all good points. And it's also worth noting that the way BC utilizes him doesn't necessarily speak to how Boston plans to or wants to. Like, and somebody had asked me a few weeks back if the Bruins have any say in how BC deploys Hagens, right? And my opinion was like, no, I think out of respect for BC's program, like the Bruins don't stick their nose into like how the Eagles should utilize Hagens in their own system, right? So it's you have to compartmentalize how he's being utilized on Chestnut Hill versus on Causeway Street in the future. But you guys are all raising the proper points. And Scott, I like how you mentioned Hagens has been able to generate in transition, especially at the winger position. Like it's not, and you mentioned David Pastrnak, it's not impossible, especially with the way the game is played today, where you have a lot of interchanging, pieces, players moving without the puck and they're swinging and all that stuff. I do agree there are ways to generate speed and offense in transition, even from the winger position. But when I think of James Hagens, I like the idea of starting from his own goal line. I like the idea of the play being in front of him. I like his vision. I like his IQ. Yes, I like his ability to generate speed and get moving downhill from his own goal line if necessary. But there are certain players where I want the play in front of them at all times when you can help it because of how smart they are. And to me, he's one of those guys. Comparing that to being on the wing where you kind of feel the breath, you can smell what the guy had for dinner the night before on that blue line, who's like waiting to pinch on you. Like, I just feel like it's different as a winger. Like, your back's to him, you're focusing on getting the puck out. So he can do it. He's been doing it at BC. I'm sure he can do it at the NHL level too, if that's how it ends up playing out. I just like right now in this moment in time, I just like the idea conceptually of the game always being in front of him because of how well he knows the game and the things he can make happen. If it turns out that the Bruins feel like maybe he is a winger at the NHL level long term, well, then from where I sit right now talking to you guys, to me, we once again have a long-term issue in Boston at 1C because it's not Elias Lindholm and it's not Pavel Zacha. So it's fine to have Hagens in the mix going forward. But if that's the case, well, now it starts to open up the can of worms of maybe you do have to try to get Robert Thomas at all costs minus Hagens, right? Like if you can find a package to bring in Robert Thomas, who's a true 1C at 26 years old, and you can do so by giving them Patra, maybe a Letourneau, maybe a roster player and a first-round pick or two, like then because if Hagens is going to be a wing, well, now who's your center then? Who's your true 1C going forward? So much of this trade deadline kind of hinges upon like, is Hagens going to be a center or not? Because if he's not going to be a center, then I think the demand for Thomas is that much bigger if you're Boston. If you think James can be your 1C, then maybe you can exercise some more patience and not give up the farm for Thomas as much as I like him.
But it's also like, how soon will it be the 1C? He's not going to be the 1C next year. Like, do you guys see him being 1C next year? Or are you saying like 2 years? Like, that's the question too, is like the timeline for it, right? Like, and I don't want to look at it as completely a negative either. To say like he's developed on the wing, like, is very promising. His season that he's had has been very good. He's leading Hockey East right now in goals and points, I believe. So he's above, his peers. And so like, I think of it this way too. Like, could he just be a guy that can do both, no matter, depending on the day? Like, like depending on what you need him to do. Does he have to be one or the other? No. If he can do both, like you can like kind of like Zaka, I think he'll be higher end than Zaka, but like in the same way you could move Zaka to wing if you needed to, like or center if you needed to, like a legitimate player who can be used interchangeably.
Yeah, I also think it's going to be interesting what Marcus Sturm thinks when he gets his hands on him, because not that like, look, hopefully, with all due respect to Sturm, like Hagens is probably going to be here longer than Sturm. That's just how hockey works, right? Like franchise players last longer than head coaches, even good head coaches. But Marcus Sturm has been someone who's like pretty clear on players he thinks are centers and players he thinks are wings. Like he's drawn this, he's like, yeah, right from the start, I thought Pavel Zacha was better as a center. He said he thinks Matt Poitras is a center, not really a wing. He now likes Casey Middlestad better on the wing. I don't think he ever really loved Casey Middlestad at center. Like I think he develops these in his mind. There clearly is some differentiation over what those jobs require, and Marcus Sturm seems to form these opinions on, oh yeah, like in my system, that's a center, that's a wing. So not that that's the be all end all in any of this either, but I am interested in like what Sturm thinks. Say he first gets him the end of this year, and then especially through training camp next year, kind of where Sturm sees him at that point will be interesting. And as it relates to this season, maybe this probably ends up being more of a discussion post trade deadline, but just watching the way this team is lined up, these 2 games out of break, it's like, isn't there just such a clear, obvious, there is clearly a spot for him somewhere in the top 9, right? Like they're doing this. All right, you're trying Husnudinov, Lindholm, Pasternak as a line. We know the second line's been good. Sturm's not touching that. Third line, it's been Acemont, Minton, Geeky. Steves has been a healthy scratch, and it's like just take the Acemont part out of that, and then whether you're putting Hagens with Lindholm and Pasternak or with Minton and either Geeky or Husnudinov on a third line, it's like there's just such a clear fit there. Now we'll see how the roster ends up looking post deadline, but right now I'm like, oh yeah, like that's the James Hagens spot.
Yeah, I mean, Hagens for Acemont is also an upgrade, right? Like, there would be some trepidation about adding a young guy, and like, is he going to be better than somebody who's in this? Like, no, not in this situation. Like, Hagens is an upgrade, and I do feel like his fit is probably better with the top line. That's my feeling, is that his fit would be better there.
I was gonna say, like, I could see a. It feels like it's been a bit since we've had somebody who's been able to set up Pasternak as a shooter. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like David's been missing somebody to be that guy. Like he's been a phenomenal facilitator. He obviously capitalizes when he gets the opportunities, but his goal scoring's been a tick down. And I think that if you can find a way to put Hagens with Pasternak, like I think that you have Elias Lindholm as like that two-way responsible. Well, I say two-way at 5-on-5. He's more one-way defensively, but you know what I mean. You don't have to worry about Elias Lindholm's defensive abilities, right? So he's responsible, and then Hagens can just feed Pasternak, and all of a sudden, I think there's an opportunity there. Now you're playing against other teams' top lines, right? And there's a big responsibility there. So maybe there's something to be said about maybe let him feed Geeky, right? And play with Minton. But now you're a little bit young on that line, but Minton's also mature beyond his years. So either way, I think you guys are right. Like there's definitely an opportunity in the top 9 for Hagens, I think, right away.
And I think the funny thing is I can see a fit in both ways, because speed wise, like those lines move pretty quickly. Like Geeky moves pretty well. Minton is young and moves. Like those two guys are slightly bigger than if he was with Elias Lindholm and David Pasternak. But the IQ is kind of what you're talking about, right, Brian? Like the IQ of being able to make a play to somebody like Pasternak. And the thing that I also come back to thinking is like, how good does everyone feel playing with Pasternak? Like, I feel like everyone almost gets an instant confidence boost from playing with him, because it's like, obviously it's a nod of approval, right? It's also being put with someone who is setting you up for the most possible success that you could have, because he's such a good player and he's going to set you up as well. And it's just, it could be maybe a shot out of the cannon at the gate for him to just kind of benefit from Pasternak's skill set. And another thing that I was told about the line that Hagens is on now is the reason he's with Hemming and they're both the wingers is because
the Bruins are going to draft Hemming this year.
Maybe. No, I think he's projected higher than, well, I guess maybe with the Toronto.
That Toronto pick.
But so is because that they both think the game the same way, and in saying that, like, that they both think the game quickly, they both have good IQ. That is why they're together. So you want to match, if you want to match guys with the same kind of hockey IQ, like you can match them with Pasternak or Geekie, because I think Geekie weirdly does kind of have the same way of thinking of the game as Pasternak. So I think either would work.
Real quick, because you mentioned the Toronto pick, Scott, and Bridget well said. The Toronto pick right now on points percentage, they have the 10th overall pick. Obviously, that's pre-lottery, but they're kind of in that sweet spot where you're taking that pick, unless they were to jump up. But it's like, is it going to be the Islanders again last year? I mean, I don't know. What are the odds of that? Not great. They weren't great the first time around, but it happened. But man, like man, oh man, I just think you have the ability to draft that. Yeah, I don't know what position they would go with there. I feel like they'd go right D, but you just don't know. It depends how the board falls. If somebody, right, like, you know what I mean? Like you can't play that game. It just, you take the best player available right there, right? Especially when you have your own pick again, unless they move it. Yeah, I just feel like, guys, I just feel like the Bruins are in a good spot right now. Like I feel like they're playing with house money, where the playoffs they're within reach. They got 3 points up on Washington for the final wild card spot, and they also have 3 games in hand on the Caps. How much of this season have we been talking about? Well, the Bruins are here in the standings, but they played 4 more games than everybody else. No, the Bruins actually have games in hand now on teams. So like the Bruins, they should make the playoffs if they can take care of business. And you have a Hagens, you have a Letourneau who's doing really well. You have a Zellers, you have Cooper Simpson who's lighting up the USHL. You have 5 first-round picks in the next 3 years. You have 3 seconds. Obviously, I think you're going to give something to get something at some point here. I'm just saying they don't have to do anything crazy here. Like, they're kind of in a good spot. So I just, and that's kind of the tenor I got from Sweeney.
By the way, yeah, you mentioned Cooper Simpson. Just, we've like barely talked about him, but you're right. Like, he is someone whose stock has skyrocketed this year, and I don't know how teams around the NHL just yet are valuing him. In terms of, like, if we talk about, where would he fit in terms of like a trade asset this deadline? Like, I don't know if the way other front offices would value him is quite caught up to the way he's developing. But like, I've talked to people who are like really high on what he's going to be, that like by the time he gets to North Dakota next year, like, could very well be viewed as like a blue chip prospect.
Well, Scott, it's funny you say that, because who is somebody who was lighting up the USHL last season, who was committed to North Dakota, who was a pretty integral piece of a trade deadline move? Who was that?
Will Zellers.
Oh, interesting. So you can kind of look at what Will Zellers went for last year as maybe Simpson is, like maybe you add him with a second and my point is, it kind of, my knee-jerk reaction to your comments, Scott, about like not knowing if other teams realize like, what his value is yet. Fair or unfair, when you have players that are playing in the CHL and then you have NCAA players that are viewed as prospects, let alone AHL players, there's kind of this like USHL stigma of like, yeah, they're not in one of the top tier amateur leagues yet. So, there's kind of like an asterisk of like, well, let's see what they do at the end. You know what I mean? But Will Zeller, he was a USHL player when he was traded last year. So I guess that could be a bit of a comp to see maybe what he could go for.
Yeah. So yeah, I didn't mean to derail that, but the mention of Simpson caught my attention.
Yeah. And he was impressive, by the way, too. Like at rookie camp, we all liked his play. His shot's really good.
So I wanted to start back because Brian, you said like the Bruins are in really good shape, and I agree. And Don Sweeney even said something along those lines of like, basically like the team's in a good spot, and we have a lot of assets that we haven't had in the past. So that naturally leads into like, okay, how much of it, if any, are you willing to part with this deadline? Like Sweeney says, I'm not going to be as aggressive as I've been in the past. And I think he's being clever with words there, where I think when he says we're not going to be as aggressive as in the past, I think he means we're not trading first round picks for rentals. And we're also not completely changing over the room like we did last year. Like I think in his mind, that's what aggressive is. It's like either all in or all out, and like going big. I do still think, even though he says that, like I do still think in the right trade, they could be aggressive for the right player with term who lines up age wise. Like I think that's still in play. So like I am curious, like how aggressive do you guys think they should be on that front in terms of trying to find a player who can become a core piece for them moving forward? Like, is that something they should be trying to do this week, or do you save that and revisit it in the off season?
It's a good question. I think it depends on what assets we're talking about. And I guess I'll say this. Matt Patra, you may like what I'm about to say or hate what I'm about to say, whatever. I think Matt Patra has a ton of skill and potential, and I think he's absolutely an NHL player. I think, in fact, he could go somewhere else, and I think he would be a good part of their present and future. Right now, it's not a matter of talent or a lack of talent for Patra in Boston. For me, and I've said this before, it seems like a lack of fit. It just seems like a numbers game. So if there's somebody out there that's in their prime that can make a difference for you at the forward position, let's just say like a Jordan Kyrou, for example, in St. Louis, right? If the cost to acquire a Kyrou is Matt Patra and like a 27 first round pick and, another asset or two, then I'd be willing to do that like right now. But if it's something involving, the Toronto 26 first round pick, or even Boston's own first round pick in 26, or like a Dean Letourneau or a Will Zellers, it really has to blow me away. And I'm not rushing to do anything involving those assets, which is surprising because, this time last year, there's no shot in hell we all thought we'd be saying here right now. I don't want to move Dean Letourneau right now. It's like, if you could tell me last year you could move Letourneau for a legit top six forward in NHL level, it's like, yeah, yesterday. But, there's a lesson to be learned there in patience and seeing what prospects can turn out to. So, Scott, to answer your question, there's a few assets the Bruins have where I just don't see the long-term fit, like Matt Patra, Lysell, like a middle, I don't know. Like there are certain prospects or assets where I'd be okay with them moving for the right deal right now. But there's a lot more prospects and assets that I just feel like you don't need to rush it right now.
Yeah, and obviously the one skate pod untouchable is Murat Husnudinov. So.
It's not even worth bringing up. Like it's just not even worth going there.
The untouchable. Let me ask you this: would you think it would be prudent, responsible to trade, if this is what the ask is, a left shot or like a left side D that you have Mason Lohrei, like for a right shot D?
In the right trade, sure. Like, look, Mason Lohrei, to his credit, has played better since those Rasmus Anderson trade rumors. He is still pretty far from untouchable in my mind. Like, I think he's an asset, so I'm not saying like I'm ready to just run Mason Lohrei out of town. I'm not doing that, but yeah, in the right move, sure. Now, what that right move is, I just still don't know. Like we talked about him before, but like I really like Mackenzie Weegar. I've said that. I just don't like that he signed for 5 more years after this, and he's already 32 years old. Like, and I think I get the sense that the Bruins have some hesitation on that kind of player too. Like the already north of 30 with a lot of term. So like Weegar fits that. Colton Parayko fits that. Jake DeBrusk fits that. But by the way, like I heard they're really not interested in DeBrusk. So
no, never happened.
Connor Garland, maybe a different story. Like I think there's maybe a little more interest there. But yeah, I mean, I would, in the right deal, I'd be willing to move Lohrei, but I don't know exactly what that is. Like, I don't know if that perfect player is out there who, especially if we're talking right shot defenseman, who's on the younger side of 30 and has term or is willing to extend. Like, that's what whatever you thought of Rasmus Anderson, like that's what he was. That's why the Bruins were so heavy on him. I don't know that there's another one of those, like that exact situation out there right now.
Well, I think Don Sweeney has a different threshold right now when it comes to age acquisition for a right defenseman versus a top 6 forward. For example, and on Lohrei, just so we're all on the same page here, if Rasmus Anderson okayed an extension to Boston, Lohrei would be a Calgary Flame right now. So let's just be clear about that. Don Sweeney was willing to move him, and it was out of Sweeney's hands at the point where he was willing to. Anderson said, I'm not, okay, no extension, no deal. But if Anderson said, yes, I'll sign an extension in Boston, Lohrei would be gone. So the Bruins do not view him as untouchable. He is an asset that they're willing to move. They were already willing to move him. That's very clear to me. But the thing about the right-handed shot defense is that even if they draft somebody, free agency is not, it's not an avenue to acquire that guy, I don't believe. The draft is, but the draft is still 4 or 5 months away. And if they draft somebody, in the first round of 2026 to be a right shot defenseman for the future, there's a small chance they could be good to go next season, but it's a greater chance that they're at least a couple of years away still. So I think Don Sweeney is trying to find a stopgap defenseman. And in his mind, I don't think he cares if Colton Parayko or Mackenzie Weegar are 32, 33, because you know what? Like, whoever they draft, if that prospect hits, they're not going to be ready for a couple of years. And I think that by the time Weegar or Parayko or somebody like that is 35, 36, hopefully the person that you've drafted this June is now into your organization at the NHL level. But they don't have any other options right now, guys. So beggars can't be choosers. If Parayko or Weegar are the only guys out there that can be a legit, significant top 4 defenseman on the right side at 32 years old, then the Bruins need somebody there because that prospect isn't there right now. But up front, I think they do have more insurance policies. They do have players in the way. So there's no reason to go out there and spend a first-round draft pick on Braden Shen or Nazem Kadri. Like, you don't need to bring in those, 30-something forwards when you do have Hagens and Letourneau and all the prospects and Minton. Like, so I think that right now, from my vantage point, they're willing to bring in a slightly older defenseman that can fill a need for the next couple of years than they would be for a forward. I think they have different thresholds right now, different standards of acquisitions.
Yeah. And by the way, not for nothing, for as many shortcomings as Don Sweeney's had in the draft, he did once upon a time draft a right shot defenseman outside the top 10 who made an impact in the NHL less than a calendar year later. Obviously, Charlie McAvoy in 2016 comes up at the end of the 16-17 season. So it's not impossible for that pick, that prospect to arrive sooner than you might think. It's really hard to bank on that.
What was Charlie's central scouting ranking heading into that draft? Do you remember? Did he go higher than lower than expected, or higher?
It was right around that, because I remember the debate. I remember like right shot D was a pretty clear need, so people had been talking about them, and the debate was McAvoy and Dante Fabro at like that point on the board. So I don't know his exact ranking, but I think it was right around there. Like I think people thought there's a chance both of these guys, or at least one of them, is available at 14. And then they both ended up being there, and they were both ranked right around there.
Yeah. So, I mean, to your point, Scott, like maybe that 26 first rounder, again, we're assuming that, if they have both of their first round picks in 26 by the draft, right? Assuming they don't trade any away, you have to imagine that one of their two picks, whether it's the one they have from Toronto, if it indeed remains outside the top 5, or if it's Boston's own, one of them will have to be allocated to a right shot defenseman. I think we're all in agreement here. If you have your first two picks, if you have both of your picks in the first round, you have to take best player available, certainly with the first draft position. But I still think we all think that one of those picks will be a right-handed shot defenseman. So to your point, maybe they do enter the league within a calendar year of a la Charlie McAvoy. And if that's the case, then yeah, maybe you don't have a knee-jerk trade for Parayko or Weegar. Maybe patience, maybe the best trades are the ones you don't make in that situation. But either way, you want to slice it or dice it up. I just feel like the Bruins are in a position of strength right now. Like, because you might not have the defensive right-handed prospects, but you do have the first 5, the 5 first-round picks the next 3 years in the 3 seconds. So you gotta get one of those, right? Like, you gotta get one of those picks this June. You have to. It's a good draft. They got 2 picks in the first round.
And obviously, we've talked a lot of spent a lot of time on this podcast talking about what the trade deadline means for the future. But can we just talk about what it means for this season? Because like we haven't spent, I don't think, any time really talking about, all right, like, I mean, I guess right shot D, you hope if you get someone, you put them right there on your second pair. That's kind of simple, but like, what does it mean for the playoffs, right? Like we're talking about adding because we're talking about a team that's played well enough to be in a wild card position and a team that set itself up to go into the playoffs. Like, do you think that adding a right shot defenseman helps their chances of, let's not even say winning the cup, let's say getting through a round? Let's say like, bolstering the current roster in a less aggressive way. Does it move the needle for a playoff push? Or was this always just about making the playoffs and then at that point you go, well, we did what we could. We made the playoffs. We promised you guys we were going to make the playoffs. Like, that's what we did. And you don't worry about it too much. Or like, because it doesn't sound to me. And the reason why rentals are off the table is because the only kinds of teams that add those players are the ones with the highest hopes of winning it, right? So obviously by saying you're taking rentals off the table, you're acknowledging, and you would be delusional to think, otherwise, but you're acknowledging that's not where you are. That's not your position. You are not the favorites to win. You could, as we all know, the NHL playoffs are crazy and there's chaos and it doesn't always pan out the way people expect. So to you guys, what does it mean for the rest of the season and the playoffs if they decide to legitimately stand pat and not get rid of assets and not even try to, I guess, not even do anything with peak or whatever, like just a stand pat, what would that mean for their playoff hopes versus a like small ads?
One thing I've been thinking of is like, I feel so much differently about what this team can do if they can climb into second or third in the division versus staying a wild card. So if they add maybe that helps them finish stronger and go, finish with a kick and get into one of those spots. If they don't and they stand pat, maybe they're more likely to stay in a wild card spot. But like, if you're a wild card team, again, not that this is totally settled, but you're most likely getting Tampa or Carolina in the first round, which I do think those are the two best teams in the East, and you would be pretty sizable underdogs. Now, if you get into like that 2-3 in the Atlantic, and we're talking about Buffalo, Montreal, or Detroit as your first round opponent, the Bruins have a shot against any of them. Like, any of those series right now are a toss up or close to it. Like, those four teams, I don't see a ton of differentiation between them. So if you're in that kind of series, it's like, well, now winning a round is absolutely in play. So, either way, like, yeah, I still don't see them as a true Stanley Cup contender or anything crazy. But, look, no one's ever complained about winning a playoff series, right? Like, that's always valuable experience. So I do think there's incentive to, like, yeah, not just make the playoffs, but try to finish strong and like get ahead of a couple of those teams that are ahead of you or right around you in the Atlantic. And Buffalo and Montreal continue to play really well. So they've put, I think Buffalo's 5 points ahead of you. You have a game in hand. Montreal, you've played the same number of games. You're 4 points behind. So again, like, slight separation there, but obviously not out of reach. Detroit has slipped a little recently. So you're right there. And like, I think that's a tangible goal that this team should want to strive for down the stretch, is like, get ahead of two of those teams that you're fighting with in your division.
Yeah. Even Tampa and Carolina, like, Tampa's obviously a great team this year. The Bruins have played them twice this year, and they played them well both times.
Mm-hmm.
I thought they carried play a lot in the first game that they played them, even though they lost. And then the second game they played them, they should have iced that game. That's you're up 5-1, right? So I think the Bruins can play against Tampa. And honestly, as good as Tampa has been this year, and Vasilevsky has been amazing, and Darren Radish has been a revelation for them, and their team statistics and metrics, they're amazing. I don't want to take anything away from Tampa, but they've been so good for so long. I look at this Tampa group versus, Tampa groups in the past, and it's like they've had better teams in recent years. That doesn't mean that they're not, still better than other teams this year. I'm just saying, like, I'm not as afraid of this Tampa team as I have Tampa in yesteryear. And then Carolina, I just don't trust Carolina with a 10-foot pole. And they to me, they're just constant underachievers in the postseason. That said, to your point, Scott, like, who's not in the playoffs this year? All likelihood, Florida Panthers. Do you have any doubt that next year, when they hit the ice with a full, healthy roster, that they're not going to be back in the postseason and a team to be reckoned with? Absolutely, right. So it's caution to the wind of, what, you just never really know. And in any given playoff season, like, it's a weak field. Take advantage of it if you can, right? I think that could be the case. I mean, look at the Eastern Conference playoff teams right now. Not a lot of pedigree there. You have Buffalo, Detroit. They haven't made the playoffs in a collective, like, 20 years. Like, if you combine their droughts, maybe more, right? It's been 14 years for Buffalo and 10 for Detroit. Pittsburgh, they've had a couple of down years, but Crosby's hurt, and Islanders aren't anything. I don't know. It's a weird Boston. Hell, look at the Bruins. They're a new group. Like, who knows what to make of them either, if you're somebody else watching, right?
Yeah, I mean, you get in, you never know what's going to happen. I personally am rooting for 2-3 matchup, Montreal versus Boston.
That's 1,000%. Like,
that is what I want.
And that would
Montreal guys will go.
And that would match the two franchises' longest head-to-head playoff drought of about 14 years, I want to say. And they would no longer be in jeopardy of exceeding that and creating a new record. So that would be nice. Yeah.
By the way, so Don Sweeney was asked, like, at the end of today's press conference, and it was actually Andy Brickley asking him, who, never asked press conference questions. So I was glad. I was like happy to see Brick in there asking a question. But asked, how important is it for this team to make the playoffs this year? And Sweeney said, I don't think we've ever deviated from the fact that we want to be a playoff team, and went on to say, like, that's our goal every year. Was our goal last year, but the way the season played out, it forced us to change course. But he says making the playoffs has undoubtedly been the goal. Says we're not there yet. We have work to do. We put ourselves in a decent spot. We've got a long way to go. It's going to be a hell of a competitive race. But our intentions are to be a playoff team. And then once you get in, it's up to the group. So, because I think like where that question comes from is I do think there's still a portion of the fan base that maybe doesn't feel like it's of the utmost importance to make the playoffs this year, that like, if they fall out of it, that shouldn't like dramatically change, this retool that started last year, where it's like, well, making the playoffs didn't have to be a necessity this year. But that they said it before the year, like, to Sweeney's credit, like he did say this before the season too, and we all kind of laughed at it. It's like, really, like that they really think they're going to be a playoff team again right away? Well, now they're here, and like it is very clearly a goal, and it does matter to them.
1,000%, and it should be a goal. And I do think it would be a huge disappointment for them to miss the playoffs. Like, you want to keep these guys are ultra competitive. You want them to not go too long without tasting playoff hockey. You want them to understand this is why we work so hard in the regular season to get to this point. You take it for granted for so long when you have a perennial playoff team, but it's important. And honestly, guys, if I'm any other NHL team and you're looking at lining up against the Bruins in the first round of the playoffs, like, do you want to play against Zadorov for 7 games and McAvoy and Jeannot and Kastelik? And the Bruins as a team, like, they're not fun to play against. That's been the MO all year, right? Little P and V. So I think it's good for the Bruins also to see, like, okay, so this is what it looks like to have Zadorov in our lineup for a 7-game playoff series. Like, this is how effective he is, or like it helps the Bruins identify, certain things as well. Like, were we right about bringing him in? Yes, no, maybe so. Like, that's just one example I'm giving, right? But
yeah, and it gets Minton his first playoff experience, and Husnudinov, and it gets Swayman more playoff experience, and Lohrei more playoff experience, and whoever, like up and down. Morgan Geekie doesn't have a ton of playoff experience. Like, that's important. So, I think it matters, and you're right too about like style of play. Like, I remember Paul Bizinek was on Jones and Keefe during the Olympic break and said the same thing. He said, like, I like this team. I like how they're constructed. I like how they play. And he said, I can tell you what, I would not want to be the team that has to play them in the first round of the playoffs. He said, like, you might get by them and win the series, but they're going to take a pound of flesh along the way.
Yeah. It's one thing to be an opposing player and, take a private flight into Boston in the middle of, December or February to play the Bruins, for one night, right? It's like, okay, but then you got to play these guys, potentially 7 times in a 2-week stretch. That's a lot of loose pucks in the corners against, some big boys in Boston, who obviously we've seen with their penalty numbers, they aren't afraid to throw their body around. That's going to be toned back down, obviously, which is a key of emphasis. The second half of, well, not second half, but final quarter of the season is their discipline and their penalty kill.
What do you think is going to be their biggest challenge that they have to make sure that they overcome in order to make the playoffs?
I think what I just said, in my opinion, penalty kill.
Yeah. Yeah, the penalties and the penalty kill for sure. Like, that they have to stay out of the box more than they did up through the Olympic break, and they got to have a better PK when they do take the penalties. Like, you can't be giving up a power play goal against per game, or even more than that, and you can't be killing multiple penalties a period, right? Like, kind of like the magic number, that sweet spot is like if you give a team 3 power plays in a game, 1 per period, you should be able to kill that, right? Like that's not insurmountable. It's when you start to stack up 2 in a period, 2 in a 8-minute stretch, 5 or 6 in a game. Like that's when it becomes a real problem where it's like, even if you do kill them, you've just killed your any 5-on-5 momentum. You've killed the flow of your lines, and the guys who don't kill penalties have been taken out of the game. Like, yeah, it's got to be that.
Can I ask you guys about Bridges? Did you have a follow up there?
No, it's fine.
Can I ask you guys about the Bruins Flyers game? Just spend a few minutes on that. We haven't talked about it yet. Some takeaways from that. We talked last episode. We expected a bit of a tussle between maybe Jeannot and Delorier. That did in fact happen. Hell of a fight. Jeannot got the better of that one, but 2 really tough guys. That's a big boy fight there. So that was nice to see. And then obviously he was atoning for Zaka being concussed and missing the Olympics and the Stadium Series. It wasn't just a concussion. It was a very consequential one that made him miss some key moments in his career. Just 2 comments from me. I felt like, David Pastrnak set up Geeky for what could have been 2 or 3 assists on the night. Geeky didn't convert. Outside of those setups, I found David's game to be a bit underwhelming in the 3rd period. I found him to be a little bit loose with the puck and just not really on his toes the way he could be. But on the other side of the spectrum, another leader for the Bruins, I thought Charlie McAvoy was phenomenal all game. And he just, man, he's playing at a different level right now. And that's good to see if you're the Bruins.
Yeah, for sure. Looked like picked up right where he was pre-Olympics, all through the Olympics. Yeah, he's just playing really good 2-way hockey right now. Yeah, it's funny. It's like I'm glad we had the Sweeney media availability today, and we waited to record until after because I just didn't have a ton to say from that Flyers game, honestly, or like
that damn stanchion.
Or like big takeaways. I'm like, yeah, that's a really frustrating loss. And like Philly had been struggling. They look like a team that's falling out of it. Like that's a game you don't, it's not a must win. And like, that's like an exaggeration, but like you really want that win, especially because it almost feels like if the Bruins win that in regulation, it's almost a knockout game. It's like that's pretty much it for the Flyers. Like they're probably done anyways. But like that would really be the blow where it's like, all right, Philly season is over. They're selling. See you next year. So like you didn't do that. So like it's frustrating. But again, like you had chances. You're right. It's like the stanchion goal, and then the second goal is the real frustrating one because you just have a complete breakdown defensively where Jamie Drysdale just gets all day to walk right down the slot and snap a shot past Swayman. And like, sure, you probably want to save, but like, it's a grade A chance, right? Like he had all day, all the time and space in the world to come in and pick his spot. So, and like watching that back, I saw it was weird after the game, and maybe Marco Sturm just hadn't watched the replay, but like he said he put that on the defenseman not coming out to challenge Drysdale, which I thought was a little odd because I'm like, you're in man-to-man up high in their system. It wouldn't have been a defenseman's job to be on Drysdale. And what I thought happened, and Morgan Geeky said this, Morgan Geeky said it was on him. And if you watch it back, it's like Minton and Pastrnak both have guys over along the boards where the puck is. Geeky is middle, initially on Drysdale, but then leaves him because he seems to think his assignment is the guy on the other side of the ice. But no one else was on Drysdale. So, like, I don't know if he just misread the situation and actually should have stayed on Drysdale. It seems like that's ultimately what he thought because he did put it on himself after the game. But again, it's like I can't lose my mind over, like, early in the season, we saw lots of breakdowns like that where guys were leaving players they weren't supposed to leave. We haven't seen as much of it. So part of me is like, all right, you just watch that on video and clean it up. And like, it sucks that it happened in that game and you lose, but like, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah. And I wanted to say, like, the other key thing that came out of the game was the road record gets worse, and it's that's a little bit concerning. They have a losing record on the road. They have a 11-13-4 road record, whereas their home record is really good, 22-8-1. So playoff teams, obviously, you got to be able to steal some on the road, especially when you're the bottom seed. And doesn't look, it seems unlikely they would be the higher seed in a matchup in the playoffs. So, that's important. And I also wanted to mention upcoming schedule, some head-to-head games that you're talking about, like, oh, that could have been a knockout punch for the Flyers. Well, they play the Capitals 2 times in the next 2 weeks. And I think those are going to be really important games. So Saturday, this upcoming Saturday, the 7th, and Saturday the 14th, they'll play Washington. The one this Saturday is at home, 12:30 p.m. So don't miss it. Like, it's a matinee game. Have your TV on early. It's on ABC as well, not Nesson. So just a heads up to people. And so is the other one. The following Saturday is a 3 p.m. on ABC game away. So, but my point of the head-to-head importance of this one is that is a team that is now directly behind you. 3 points behind you in the standings. They are the team just outside the wild card. You are the team just inside the wild card. And at the time that you play them, that second time, you may really, really need those points if things don't go well for you in between, because they got games in between that as well. They play Pittsburgh twice in the next 2 weeks.
Which, like, by the way, like, yeah, okay, Pittsburgh doesn't have Sidney Crosby, so you might think, oh, that's a good time. Like, don't sleep on them. They just beat Vegas 5-0. Like, pretty emphatic statement.
Yep. Yeah. Bridget, you're right to bring up the head-to-heads against Washington, and as stated earlier, you have 3 games in hand on them. So if you come out, net positive in the points, category against them in the next 2 games against them, and you have 3 games in hand, right? So that's that. And yeah, the road record is crazy with the beautiful white jerseys that they have. Don't know how that can be the case. And just one note of news before we sign off here is Mark Diver mentioned that Dan Zlashmelis is out for the season too, and he's a player that maybe we could see later in the year as well. So we can touch on that a little bit later if we want down the line. Thank you all very much for listening, and we will talk to you on Wednesday. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.